I said to the producers yesterday when I personally requested that you come on, I think you're going to find that this guy is somebody we will want to have on regularly. And I want to talk to you, Dr. Jasser, about Berlin first, if we may. Of course, the breaking news as it happened a couple of nights ago, and I'm obviously the editor of the London bureau, which covers that area, meant that I was sitting there at my desk for hours on end, making phone calls, following leads, social media, digging, all that kind of stuff, figuring out what was going on here. And 2 days later, we seem not that much more clear as to whether or not the perpetrators are going to be caught. We're hearing now about some anti-terror raids overnight, and these known Islamist cells that are in Germany and right across Europe, quite frankly. And the question I have for you is this, Dr. Jasser: if these guys are known to be Islamists who are overtly trying to subvert the German. The country of Germany, the country of the United Kingdom, country of France, country of the United States. Why isn't more being done to stop this happening?
Well, because of the current axis upon which we focus in counterterrorism is a violence. It's pointing at currently all they're looking for is when these guys get turned on to commit an act of violence, and most of them have no ability to demonstrate that they're going to be violent, but they are Islamists. They are insurgents. They reject Western systems. They're very anti-Semitic, anti-Christian. They divide the world into the land of Islam and land of war. But that ideology is not monitored. All we're monitoring is trying to figure out when they're all of a sudden going to become violent. And most of them only start to demonstrate that a few hours or at the most a few days before they commit the act. And that's why we need to start monitoring their public footprint of political Islam. And what is that? It's the grievance groups that say that Islam is, that Muslims are discriminated against and that the West is Islamophobic. It's the anti-Semitism. It's the misogyny where women are treated as second-class citizens, and you see them talking about the right to wear the veil and rather than the right for women to have independence and bodily autonomy. All these things that the governments of France and Germany and Britain and the U.S. would perceive as simply shades of theology need to be monitored and looked at in a public footprint perspective. And then you'd be able to say, oh, these are the guys that could become militarized or operationalized. And otherwise, there's no way to predict it. You can't. They're using such unconventional means now, since ISIS is telling them to use trucks and knives and things that would not be able to be monitored, that we have to be looking at the precursor ideologies, which is the hate for the West, the hate for the system, that really is out there. It's easy. I mean, as you know, in the work I do, I attract most of these barbaric Islamists. I mean, look at the Paris attacks. The Paris attacks occurred in November, and then in March, the same cell committed a second act. Right. These guys hid out in Islamist insurgent communities, not militant communities, but insurgent communities that protected them from the police. That tells you how big the problem is. And this guy now is probably similarly. I guarantee you he's not hiding out in churches or synagogues.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And of course, when you look at a lot of the ghettoization that's taking place across Europe and the United States in these communities, and the fact that, our governments respectively don't seem to want to deal with whether they're no-go zones or some go zones, or just happen to be old-fashioned ghettos, don't want to have to try and break this up and deal with it, because we operate on the basis that any targeting, even if it is, we use the word targeting and immediately it has a negative connotation, right? But targeted efforts, Dr. Jasser, I think you'll agree, having been a military man, targeted efforts are better than scattergun approaches, or better than generalizations or what have you. And targeted approaches to breaking up ghettoization, to making sure that the Molenbeeks of the world don't actually exist, and allow these cesspits of radicalism to proliferate, would be a good thing. But of course, the Islamophobia narrative stands very much foursquare in the way of that. There are two things that I wanted to ask you about And I find them both really fascinating, and I'm going to do it in this order with you. I don't know if you saw this, but yesterday there was this YouTube Muslim prankster who filmed himself being taken off a Delta Airlines plane. This became very, very prominent news very quickly due to the Facebook trends and Twitter trends here and there. And I will say this as an introductory part of this question, Dr. Jasser, is I have been discriminated against because of my name and because of the faith that my parents raised me in. And I'm sure you have encountered discrimination on that basis as well. We're not saying that these things don't exist. We're saying that, firstly, they are much smaller than a lot of the narratives. Well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'm saying that it's a lot smaller than a lot of the narratives we hear. I'm also saying that some of the things you hear about this stuff, like the girl in New York who claimed that she was attacked by Donald Trump fans and supporters, and like this YouTube prankster yesterday claiming that he got kicked off the plane simply for saying some words in Arabic, these are confected stories by activists. What do you think when this stuff is going on? Does this make it easier or harder for everyday Muslims?
Oh, I mean, I can't tell you how much harder it makes it. And we right away on my Twitter feed and on Facebook exposed quickly that this guy was a prankster, and obviously he had been outed as a hoax that he had committed in 2014 and just trying to get attention as a YouTuber. And, you know, this is people may say he's not an Islamist, but this is the first stage, 101 or 201 of Islamism, which is to exploit a non-Muslim society, to exploit its vulnerability, which is the protection of minorities, and then mock it and separate Muslims out of that society into our own consciousness. So what happens is, by mocking it and exploiting it and then saying, oh, he was discriminated and kicked off, but actually lying about it, not only is it a crying wolf phenomena where those who may be discriminated against are going to be ignored, but it soaks up the bandwidth of what we should be doing. And I've always said, if you want to melt away any fear of Muslims, the best way is for Americans to see us leading the battle against radicals, for Americans to see us being basically recognizing that this is a Muslim problem that needs a Muslim solution. Then they'd say, oh, wait a minute, these are our allies. They're not our enemies. But until we do that, these guys are actually radicalizing our community by telling everyone that, well, make it up or whatever, grievances are our biggest problems. And, you know, the elephant in the room, even from the discussion you and I just had on Berlin, the elephant in the room is that our so-called allies, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, these huge cauldrons of tens and hundreds of millions of Islamists that believe in the Islamic State want to separate that world into good and evil, being Islam being good and the rest being evil. And unless we address that primary theocracy, which is the mentality that secular society is evil, and if you live here, then, well, Americans hate you, etc., those types of mentalities can't be defeated. We have to abandon that and say, you know what, we're done with the grievance mills, and they are corrupt, and we need to no longer identify as a collective as Muslims, but identify as Americans first. And that's the main core harm that's happening with these types of wackos.
We're talking with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Just finally, Dr. Jasser, if you'll entertain me on this issue, there is an activist group in the United Kingdom, very much funded by the same sources that you get, the Open Society Foundations and the European Commission and so on and so forth. This group is called Hope Not Hate. It finds its roots in anti-fascist or what they call anti-fascist movements, very much funded by the same sources that you get, the Open Society Foundations and the European Commission and so on and so forth. This group is called Hope Not Hate. It finds its roots in anti-fascist or what they call anti-fascist movements, very much not anti-fascist in itself, very much the other side of the coin of fascism, communism. That's where it has its roots, but it's really moved on now to dealing not with groups like the British National Party, this hardline nationalistic party from the United Kingdom that is now defunct. It's moved on to dealing with conservatives, conservatism, and the issue of what it calls Islamophobia. And you are one of the people that Hope Not Hate identified as effectively an Islamophobe in one of its reports from last year, called you an anti-Muslim campaigner effectively, alongside other Muslim reformers like Majid Nawaz and Raquel Sarasvati. This group is a group that is run by a chap called Nick Lowles, wealthy white guy living in North London, I imagine. How do you, as a practicing Muslim, deal with somebody like that who accuses you of hating people of your own faith out of, let's take phobia for what phobia means, out of irrationality? What do you have to say to someone like that?
I mean, our response is, first of all, just to tell people by seeing this, I hope you can realize when you ask where are the voices of moderate Islam, we get slammed from the radicals who say we're not Muslims and we're apostates, even though we love our faith, and we get slammed from the left who's doing the bidding of the Saudis and the Iranian government and others who really don't want us reformists to have a voice. So, they're smothering our voices. But our bottom line answer is they're the bigot. They're the ones who want to measure Islam by the misogyny, by the Islamic theocracies, and say, well, Islam, we won't hold it to the same humanitarian universal human rights that we hold Christianity and Jews and other modern faiths do. No, we'll hold Islam to 7th century standards, and therefore call anyone within the faith that even raises the question of modernization as being a Uncle Tom or a self-hating Muslim. Forget the fact that Zudi and his family have built 4 different mosques around the country. Forget the fact that personally people that know me actually consider me to be quite orthodox. That doesn't matter. When they approach Muslims, it's this bigotry of low expectations that, just like Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, he went to a mosque that has this segregation of men and women, and he looked at the sisters in the back and said, to the sisters upstairs, hello, while they're behind a screen.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a leftist liberal. And Obama did the same thing at a mosque in Baltimore, went to a segregated mosque with gender apartheid. Our Muslim reform movement protested that, and they held signs outside the mosque saying, how can you dare go to a mosque that doesn't share any of the values that you hold Christians and Jews and other faiths accountable to? It's because you have a bigotry of low expectations when it comes to Muslims, and you are judging. You know what's funny is that Nick Lowes and their Orwellian hope not hate, which is actually hate not hope, their Orwellian approach actually then is doing takfir. They're basically doing the same thing that bin Laden, that Baghdadi of ISIS, that the Saudi government does to Muslims that get flogged. They're basically saying, oh, I'm not Muslim enough. The only Muslims are the apologists that don't recognize the need for reform, which is just Orwellian beyond belief. Uncle Tom or a self-hating Muslim. Forget the fact that Zudi and his family have built 4 different mosques around the country. Forget the fact that personally people that know me actually consider me to be quite orthodox. That doesn't matter. When they approach Muslims, it's this bigotry of low expectations that, just like Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, he went to a mosque that has this segregation of men and women, and he looked at the sisters in the back and said, to the sisters upstairs, hello, while they're behind a screen.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a leftist liberal, and Obama did the same thing at a mosque in Baltimore, went to a segregated mosque with gender apartheid. Our Muslim reform movement protested that, and they held signs outside the mosque saying, how can you dare go to a mosque that doesn't share any of the values that you hold Christians and Jews and other faiths accountable to? It's because you have a bigotry of low expectations when it comes to Muslims, and you are judging. You know what's funny is that Nick Lowes and their Orwellian hope not hate, which is actually hate not hope, their Orwellian approach actually then is doing takfir. They're basically doing the same thing that bin Laden, that Baghdadi of ISIS, that the Saudi government does to Muslims that get flogged. they're basically saying, oh, I'm not Muslim enough. The only Muslims are the apologists that don't recognize the need for reform, which is just Orwellian beyond belief.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, really robust response to groups like Hope Not Hate, who I've got to tell you, I'm sure you get this all the time as well. Send people my way via my Twitter feed. That's at Raheem Kassam, who send people my way, calling me a coconut, calling me an Uncle Tom. I'm sure you get this all as well. Dr. Jasser, just tell our audience where they can learn more about you, what the website is, that kind of thing.
My website is AIF as in forum, AIFdemocracy.org. And our website with the Muslim Reform Movement is muslimreformmovement.org. It has our declaration, and it'll soon be much more robust over the next few weeks. My Twitter feed is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, DrZuhdi Jasser, Jasser. And please follow me and help us enlarge our platforms.
And I second that. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, thanks so much for joining us here on Breitbart News Daily.
Anytime. Thank you for all you do.